A large chunk of people have already had their fantasy football drafts, and I wanted to go through and do something that's hopefully going to be useful for the people that are either one, preparing for their draft, or two, have already gotten through those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with y'all the individual podcasts that I've been making for new members of flockfantasy.com over the past few weeks and give you my overall thought process on what you should be doing with your fantasy football teams after your draft is over. So let's go ahead and let's pull this up, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to head over to our Discord. Of course, you should be in our Discord by now. And we are going to pull up the roster submissions tab and get into this. Now, just in case you are a new member of flockfantasy.com and you don't know how to get your team broken down either on a YouTube live stream or in a personalized podcast, here's a quick little run through. So once you sign up to flockfantasy.com, where of course all my rankings, exclusive content, and everything is, and use promo code FLOCK. If you sign up with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription and promo code FLOCK with the Mother Flocker tier. That's how you unlock this, and that's how you get that podcast breakdown. But you click the Discord icon at the very top of flockfantasy.com or on your account page, and it will immediately link your flockfantasy.com account with your Discord account. And if you use promo code FLOCK with the Mother Flocker tier, then you will have this tab on Discord roster submission unlocked for Mason's Flock. And then you go ahead and send me screenshots of your team, preferably also screenshots of your league settings, screenshots of your draft, whatever you want included. I will be happy to go through and dive into everything there. But let's go ahead and let's get into this, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be getting this first podcast going for Hit Me Draco Flash, my man. Thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. Going to be super happy to go through, check this team out. Now, it's a 10-team PPR format where we had the first pick. So before we even look at the actual players and talk about, oh, okay, how do we like these guys? How do we like this construction? I do want to at least give some credit to the league settings that we are going to be playing with, because this is really going to dictate how we are wanting to build our team and what's most important to structure from a running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end perspective. So with this being a 10-team league where you're only starting one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, really depth is not going to be important at all. The only thing that's going to matter in this style contest is going to be the ceiling. Okay, I'm sorry, but in your 10-team league, if you only start two wide receivers and a flex, someone like Deontay Johnson, even if you love the guy, someone like Brandon Ayuk, Treylon Burks, Hollywood Brown, those wide receiver 2 prototypes, they're really not going to fundamentally move the needle and ever win you your league. In this 10-team league where the shallow lineup only has one flex spot, you truly do need someone that has access to that elite level ceiling. So we are going to be structuring our team based off that thought. Now, starting off at quarterback, having Justin Fields, beautiful. Obviously, we prefer Justin Fields in a 4-point passing touchdown format, given his overall rushing upside, but he lacks a little bit of the actual passing volume. So I prefer Fields in that 4-point passing touchdown league, but I'm perfect with them anywhere. And I think we can say Fields probably, if we're going to be realistic with ourselves, has a low floor, right? That's not why, that's why he's not being drafted up there with Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't have the same floor that those quarterbacks do. But we can say at the same time that Justin Fields does have the elite level ceiling from a fantasy football perspective, given his rushing upside. So I love sitting there with Fields at quarterback. Now, going over to the bench where we have Tua, I am okay if you want to roster a backup quarterback in this format. I'm going to prefer not having a backup, my friend. Of course, Tua is still a great QB overall. So, if you really wanted to, if we got Tua in the last round, sure you can. I'd probably want it myself. But going over to RB, we're currently sitting with Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor in this lineup. Now, Taylor's the perfect example of the exact kind of player that we are looking for this format, right? I'm going to say with Jonathan Taylor, this is a running back that 100% has a low floor. Like, we don't even know what the situation will be this next season. But this is a running back that at the same time was the #1 overall pick in fantasy football drafts last year. If he goes to Miami, I am penciling in Jonathan Taylor as the top 5 running back for this next season. Clearly, we get him at a massive discount based off how much talent we have through this entire team. So, I mean, yeah, having Taylor there in the flex is the perfect guy. Going down to the bench, we have Breece Hall, another high upside, low floor option, especially at the beginning of the season, but having him as your RB4, beautiful. Now, going over to wide receiver, we're currently sitting with Jefferson, Michael Thomas in the starting lineup. Now, I'm not a big Michael Thomas guy, and to be honest with you, I think that it's almost laughable seeing Michael Thomas there at 15 points for his projection week 1. Like the fact that NFL Fantasy is projecting Michael Thomas for 15 points, where they're projecting Jonathan Taylor for 12.5 and projecting Justin Jefferson for 7. I literally want to laugh at it. I do not want to be starting Michael Thomas week 1 in this format. Please go ahead and instead start someone like Amari Cooper. I think Amari is a phenomenal wide receiver 2 option to pair him up with Justin Jefferson. Going back to what we were talking about previously, I don't think the wide receiver depth is going to be that important in this style league, especially when we have the elite level running backs top to bottom as well. So I'm not too concerned about the wide receiver depth. Just a quick side note I would have, make sure we're not starting Michael Thomas, even if he's quote unquote projected higher than guys like Amari Cooper, Christian Watson on NFL Fantasy. I mean, there's just absolutely no reason to have Michael Thomas sitting there in the starting lineup. Now, going over to tight end, I actually really do want to have an elite level tight end in this format. Just considering the fact you only have 1 flex, you only start 2 wide receivers, they're generally going to make up such a high percentage of your starting lineup output on a week-to-week basis. So love seeing that we have TJ Hawkinson there. Now, I can't see what starting defense we have, but I can see that we have a bench defense down there with the Green Bay Packers. So I'm going to operate under the assumption that we do also have a defense in the starting lineup right now. And if that is the case, I will say 100% we can't be having this kind of bench allocation. We can't be rostering a backup defense. We can't be rostering a backup quarterback and a backup tight end all on the same team in a 10-team league where you only have 1 flex and we're only sitting here with 6 bench spots. I would 100% be fine if you wanted to roster 1 of Pat Freiermuth, 1 of Tua. I mean, these are guys that are very appealing at cost for their individual positions. But from that overall roster construction standpoint, I think that I would try to prioritize running backs with upside down here on the bench. And if you could say, go through and trade like Pat Freiermuth and Michael Thomas, get a wide receiver upgrade, even if it's just the most marginal of wide receiver upgrades, right? Or go trade Tua and Christian Watson and get a tiny wide receiver upgrade there as well. Those would be moves that I'm trying to make just so we can open up those roster spots down here on the bench and bring in more high upside running backs / wide receivers. And I would also just be looking to flat out cut the backup defense that we have with the Green Bay Packers here, my friend. But overall, great team. Love the talent. Love the swings that we took for the upside where we did. I love the squad. I think we just pretty much want to be fixing the starting lineup a bit, taking Thomas out, putting Amari in, possibly looking to make those 2-for-1 deals down there on the bench, open up the roster spots for running backs, wide receivers. And that's how I'm going to be trying to optimize for a format like this, my friend. But I love the team. Love the team. And again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock. I really hope we were able to help you out somewhat there. I really hope you're able to get something from that. And of course, if there's anything I can ever do for you, please don't hesitate. Reach out to me. Let me know. And I'll be happy to get it done for you, my friend. But we're going to go ahead and dive into this next team. So since we're streaming, they do have the names cut off for a lot of these people if they're their exact Discord names. So I'm sorry, my man, not going to be able to give you an exact shout out here. It's privacy reasons with Discord. But again, thank you for being a member of the flock, and we'll be happy to get into this. And of course, just in case you are just rolling into this live stream, if you don't know what's going on, for new members of flockfantasy.com that sign up with promo code FLOCK with the Mother Flocker tier, I mean, yours truly is going through and making a podcast breakdown. Usually, sometimes we will do it on a live stream if I have a ton to get through, like today, about your fantasy football team, grade it overall, and come up with potential moves that we can be making in the future. If y'all are interested in that, you can find that link in the live chat description comment section as well. But, and then SSB Clip says, what's the Discord link? You'll find the Discord link where you can link your flockfantasy.com account with the Discord on flockfantasy.com at the top and on your account page. So you should be able to see it in a couple different spots. Okay. Now, our next one says, what up? Just wrapped up my first draft of the year. What are your thoughts in a full PPR format? All right, let's go ahead and let's get into this, my man. Very similar league settings to what we saw in the last draft, right? Where we are only starting 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex. And very similar to the last one. Generally, how we are trying to take advantage of this format is I'm going to be straying away from wide receiver depth. And instead, I'm going to go ahead and try to load up on an elite level quarterback, an elite level wide receiver, an elite level tight end, because they're going to make up such a high percentage of your starting lineup output on a week-to-week basis. The wide receiver depth, those high floor, low ceiling guys just simply aren't going to really move the needle in this style league. Now, with that being said, I think Kirk Cousins is almost the perfect example of that. Kirk Cousins, for 3 straight seasons now, has been the quarterback 12 from a points per game perspective. With Cousins, if you're in like an underdog best ball format, I'm very comfortable with this season-long projection where I think Kirk Cousins is going to be a pretty damn good option in fantasy if you're looking at the long term. But from a week-to-week perspective, I don't realistically know what his ceiling is if he can be a top 5 QB, just because he does not have any rushing upside. Now, if it's a 6-point passing touchdown format, I'm fine with you rostering Kirk Cousins, just because he could potentially have the passing volume and make up for his overall lack of rushing upside with said passing volume. But if it's a 4-point passing touchdown league, I would love a better quarterback here. Going down to the bench, we aren't rostering a backup QB, and generally, that's exactly what I want to see. If it's a bench where there's only 5 roster spots, I would rather roster those high upside running backs like we're doing with Khalil Herbert, Zach Charbonnet, Roschon Johnson, but that's the instance where we have Josh Allen. That's the instance that we have Jalen Hurts. And in that instance, it makes so much sense to grab that extra RB. However, if Cousins is our QB1, I actually probably would prefer seeing if we could just pick up someone like Anthony Richardson off the waiver wire, right? If it's a 4-point passing touchdown format, looking for that elite level ceiling later on. Now, going over to RB, we have a lot of upside, not much security, right? I mean, we have Jonathan Taylor, who obviously has the ceiling of the running back 1 overall in fantasy, but also we have no idea what the situation will be this next season. The floor is pretty damn low. We have Breece Hall, who, if he was not coming off a torn ACL, if Dalvin Cook was not there, I would say Breece Hall has the upside to be the number 1 overall running back in fantasy, but we have inherent uncertainty based off the injury and also the addition of Dalvin Cook this next season. You have Javonte Williams coming off his own destroyed knee, at least he played in the preseason, and then we have the Chicago Bears running backs and Zach Charbonnet. So I really like the fact that we are swinging on running back upside. Now, I will say, generally, I'm going to be trying to stray away from starting Breece Hall week 1. You can kind of see this on Yahoo's fantasy projections forum, where they have him at 7.5 projected points for this week. Just like we were talking about in the previous team, those projections aren't everything, right? We don't want to be listening those projections one for one. They are wrong all the time, but it does speak to the fact that there is just that inherent uncertainty and that we really don't know what this role is going to be between Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook early on in the year, that is. I really think Hall has the elite level upside for second half of the season to go out there and dominate, but if we could potentially look to not start Breece Hall, I would like that. And I would almost say the same thing about Javonte, but I probably would start Javonte Williams over Breece Hall, at least for week 1. And if we wanted to go through and instead slide someone else into the starting lineup, I think you could probably play Drake London in the flex. Can everybody please spam the chat right now? Where would you rather go in your flex spot week 1? Would you rather start Breece Hall or Drake London? Obviously, I would rather have Breece Hall in the long term, but week 1, I am unsure. And also, we're 1 like away from hitting 200 likes in this live stream. If y'all are enjoying this, make sure you go down there and drop that like. And it looks like everybody's saying Drake London. Yeah, so here, my man, the chat is agreeing. They would rather have London as well. So I think we possibly get Breece Hall out, but I do like the fact that we are taking those upside shots at RB, right? And then going over to wide receiver, we have Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, and then on the bench, we have Drake London. We have Zay Flowers as well. So we do have those wide receiver moonshots. Also with Chase and Olave, we have a ton of security. I like the Hawkinson-Cousins stack. And to be honest with you, like in underdog best ball drafts, I've taken a lot of that pair. I think that Hawkinson's the perfect guy for this format at the same time. And this isn't something that I think you should do at the very beginning of the season, but more so once we begin to get clarity with these running backs, right? Because this is a team that I think honestly may struggle just a little bit early on. And we're not trying to optimize for weeks 1, 2, and 3, right? That's not the main thing we're looking for, or you would have just gone through and drafted Jamal Williams in every league. But even if we are super excited about where our team's going to be by the time we get to weeks 8, 9, and 10, based off the fact that Javonte Williams will presumably be fully healthy. Breece Hall will be fully healthy and most likely will be taking a larger percentage of this backfield from Dalvin Cook. At the same time, these rookies, guys like Zay Flowers, Zach Charbonnet, Roschon Johnson may be coming on, and our team across the board is just extremely young with guys like Drake London, Chris Olave going into year 2, Jamar Chase going into year 3. I think this is going to be a team that gets better as the season progresses. But at least for week 1, week 2, week 3, maybe it's going to be a little difficult to know exactly what we have across the board. But once we get some of those rookies breaking out, or once we get some clarity on, okay, yeah, I know I can start Breece Hall on a week-to-week basis. I know Javonte Williams is 100% good to go, and I know this is going to be a great spot. Once we have the clarity where we feel comfortable at running back, wide receiver, then at that point, I think we are going to be looking to make a 2-for-1 deal with Kirk Cousins and try to get that upgrade in the starting lineup. Because one other thing that I want to point out is the fact that you only have 6 bench spots here, or 5 bench spots. I mean, this is an extremely shallow bench, so it is going to be very advantageous for us to make waiver wire moves through the course of the season. So every time we can make a 2-for-1 deal and at the same time open up a roster spot for us, I think that's going to make a lot of sense, my friend. So yeah, overall, love the team. I think that you remain still for now, sit on your hands. Just move Breece Hall down to the bench, Javonte Williams from the flex to RB2, Drake London in the flex spot week 1, just so we can get some clarity on the Breece Hall situation week 1. And then in the long term, once we understand what the roles are for these running backs and they start to come on, then we take one of those RBs or we take a depth wide receiver, package in them with Cousins, and see if we can get an elite level quarterback in return. Okay. But again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock, my friend. Really hope you're able to get something from that. Really hope we were able to help you out in some way. And as always, if there is anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate. Reach out to me. Let me know. I'd be super happy to help you out in any way that I can, my man. Okay. And Zerum says where to submit for roster for review. Okay. So once you're on flockfantasy.com, promo code flock, mother flocker tier. Once you have hit the Discord button on flockfantasy.com to link your Discord account with your flockfantasy.com account, then go to the Mason's Flock section of the group chat, hit roster submission, and send it there, my friend. And then you don't have to be on the lookout for the channel. You don't have to be on the lookout for anything. I will just send you a personal DM. The majority of the time, they will be personalized podcasts just sent to you directly. But if it is on a live stream, I will send you the link to the live stream, and I'll tell you the exact time that we broke down the team, and that will come through your DMs, my friend. But Tway coming out says, just finished my 12-team draft at the 103 spot. IDPs are interchangeable week to week, so those don't matter. Not feeling great about the team, though. Okay, so I like a couple different things. I like, one, that you let me off the hook with IDPs, my man, because I'm not going to lie to you. If you made me try to talk about IDPs, I would flat out embarrass myself. You most likely would know 10 times more than I would, and I would be the most useless person on the planet. So I like the fact that you let us off that hook. And I also like the fact that we actually get to see where you drafted these guys. So we are able to go through and go, oh man, you really reached on that guy there. But again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock, my friend. Going to be super happy to go through, check this team out for you. But here we start off round 1 with Jamar Chase. I mean, Jamar Chase pick 3 makes a ton of sense. I'm going to operate under the assumption that this is going to be a format similar to what we saw in the last few leagues, right? Where we are starting, say, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex. And y'all know generally in that format, what I've been saying is you're going to find such great wide receiver values later on in the draft that it does make a lot of sense to grab an elite quarterback early and possibly also get some exciting running backs at the same time. But when you get Jamar Chase at pick 3, I mean, it is such a damn good value that you kind of just have to go ahead and pull the trigger, right? Now, this is where things get a little interesting because Chris Olave, pick 22, is generally a pick that I'd be super pumped to make in like an underdog draft, right? Where we know in those underdog drafts, it's incredibly difficult for us to be able to go through and find values at the wide receiver position later on. However, if you are looking at what we have in your regular redraft league where we know that we're going to be able to get strong wide receiver values in the middle rounds, there it's going to be a little bit different in terms of, okay, well, do we need to start wide receiver? Because is this going to handicap from taking some of the wide receiver values that we like later in the draft? So generally what I've been doing a lot here, if it's that league where you only have one flex, is I would go with an elite level quarterback. If somehow you had, say, Josh Allen at QB, if you had Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, or instead say, Jalen Hurts, I think that would make so much sense there in the second rounds. But we go Olave. I'm fine with it. We are starting off with 2 elite level wide receivers. Taylor round 3 makes too much sense, right? Because I'm going to operate under the assumption that with this ESPN draft, running backs are pushed up the draft board just a bit. So if we're imagining the running backs that we have available to us in round 3, and imagine it's like Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, and you have to go the upside of Jonathan Taylor there. Justin Fields with the 4-5 turn makes a lot of sense in a 4-point passing touchdown format. Dameon Pierce in round 5. We're just playing catch-up running back. Cam Akers, pick 70. Generally, I'm not a big Akers guy, but I'd say at this price point, it does make sense if we just need some clarity at the running back position, especially early on. We go Hollywood 75, Jerry Jeudy 94. So if we're looking at Jeudy, this is the perfect spot to take him, right? Now with Jerry Jeudy, this is a wide receiver where you don't necessarily know what we can expect early on in the season. But if you are taking him as your wide receiver 4 behind Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Hollywood Brown, it does not matter in the slightest what he is giving you at the beginning of the season. The beginning of the season is not going to make an impact for you. You are going to be much better off just going through and trying to optimize for the upside that we are going to have during the bye weeks, as well as later on in the year. Any wide receiver you're taking here at 94, you're not starting week 1. You're not starting week 2. You're not starting week 3. They're not going over Chase. They're not going over Olave. They're not even going to go over Hollywood more times than not. So to go through and grab Jerry Jeudy at pick 94, I think that makes a lot of sense. Followed up with Gibson 99, Kmet 118, Quentin Johnston 123, Jalen Warren 142. The year 2 tight end in Tennessee. Now, this is where it makes a lot of sense to grab a backup tight end, right? Because I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing me say, like, oh, okay, we have TJ Hawkinson. Man, you got to go through, you got to sell Pat Freiermuth on your bench. We don't need 2 tight ends. Or, oh, okay, you have Mark Andrews. Yeah, drop this guy on the bench. What the hell are we doing rostering 2 tight ends? If Cole Kmet is your first tight end off the board, I would 100% agree you need to roster another guy. And this is generally something that's fine doing if you take both these guys extremely late, where by no means are you guaranteed to get production with Cole Kmet. By no means are you guaranteed to get production with the year 2 tight end in Tennessee. But we are taking 2 bites at the apple. We have 2 shots for one of these guys to turn into something, which is generally the best way to go about it, right? However, of course, if you were to take that elite level tight end, such as Andrews, such as Hawkinson, then there's no point to do it because you've already invested so much into the position early on, and you want to be optimizing for running back, wide receiver depth on the bench, but you already have enough running back, wide receiver depth with this team when we wait to take our first tight end in Cole Kmet 118. And then also at the same time, what we do with this team is we go ahead and we don't draft a backup quarterback. We took Justin Fields there at the 4-5 turn. We're going to start Justin Fields every single week regardless. So yeah, just rostering Fields makes a lot of sense. My only reservation that I have with this team is going through and taking Romeo Doubs 190. Now, keep in mind, 190 is not as late as it would be in an underdog draft because here you have kickers being drafted, you have defensive players being drafted, you probably have defensive players being drafted as well. So here, I would assume there's probably going to be a better running back viable for us. And just generally how I want people to be thinking about this last roster spot on their team, right? Because Romeo Doubs, in all effectiveness, is the last roster spot on your team if we ignore the IDP players and we ignore the kicker. This is someone that we want to be able to cut week 1 easily. If things don't go our way, if he doesn't look to have the role that we want, we can go ahead, we can cut him, no harm, no foul, and we're going to get that clarity, go get someone off the waiver wire. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, we want him to have the upside where if things were to break his way, oh my gosh, yeah, week 1, we already know this guy's going to be someone on our roster for the foreseeable future, and he has the upside to actually move the needle. So the perfect example of what we're looking at with this last roster spot essentially is never going to be one of these depth wide receivers such as Romeo Doubs, right? You're always going to be able to get someone like that off the waiver wire. Instead, we're going to go try to call shot on a running back, right? We're going to take Kareem Hunt. What if Jonathan Taylor gets traded and then Kareem Hunt signs at Indianapolis? Then all of a sudden we know for a damn fact, okay, yeah, Kareem Hunt's actually going to help us win this league. Or say Leonard Fournette, Jonathan Taylor gets traded, Leonard Fournette signs with Indianapolis, or Leonard Fournette goes signs in Miami. Then all of a sudden we know, oh yeah, Leonard Fournette's going to do something for us here. But on the flip side of that, if neither guy signs, then they're the first guy out the door, and we're easily able to go pick up someone off the waiver wire. Now, when it comes to Romeo Doubs, what happens week 1 where we get that kind of clarity? What's probably going to happen is he has 2 receptions, 40 receiving yards, and you're sitting there going, okay, I don't know if I want to cut him. Yeah, like we didn't really give him a fair shot, but he's not good enough to start. He's not good enough to make a difference. It's kind of like all these other guys on the waiver wire, and you're just kind of wasting the raw spot on nothing in my mind. So I'd rather take a swing on like high upside running back there with that last spot. I mean, especially if we're already sitting with, say, like Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Hollywood Brown, Jerry Jeudy, Quentin Johnston. Just my thought process, because if we look at this team, I would say that the overall, I don't want to say flaw, but the weakness with this team outside of tight end is going to be running back. We're already elite at wide receiver. I think we have a lot of upside at the running back position with someone like Jonathan Taylor. But of course, the situation may not play out. Jonathan Taylor may find himself in a bad spot. Cam Akers may just completely get washed out of Los Angeles. It's not like Cam Akers is by any means a guarantee. So I would rather just roster that last running back if we can. But outside of that, I really do like this team, my friend. I think what we're primarily going to be looking to do is roster these guys until we get to about weeks 4, 5, 6. Then at that point, I think we can begin to make some more moves outside of the waiver wire. But the reason I'm saying that we're going to have to wait until that point is I think we're going to have to wait until we get some clarity on Jerry Jeudy's health as well as a Quentin Johnston breakout. Because it's going to be difficult for us to sell a wide receiver at this moment to go get an upgrade at tight end just because we have an injured Jerry Jeudy. We have Quentin Johnston, who's a rookie, who's obviously not going to be producing right now. But if we can go through and get Jeudy back and healthy and maybe a Quentin Johnston breakout, then at that point, we'd have the wide receiver talent and the wide receiver depth to go through and package one of our wide receivers with either Cole Kmet or whoever else we're starting at tight end at that moment, and see if we can go out there and trade for someone like Dallas Goedert. See if we can go trade for someone like TJ Hawkinson. That would be able to actually move the needle. Sorry, my friend. Hopefully you were able to get something from that. Hopefully we were able to help you out in some way. And oh, ladies and gentlemen, my throat. Oh, it's getting us. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, my friend, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. Be super happy to help you out in any way I possibly can. Okay. But I saw a question, and Carter says, can't make a Flock Fantasy account due to me living in the UK and needing a US phone number. You don't need a phone number to go through and verify your Flock Fantasy account, my friend. You can either do so with your email or phone number. Phone number is optional, so just don't put in your phone number if you are from Europe and we can't send you a confirmation text or anything. So yeah, just use an email and you should be good, my friend. Okay, but let's go ahead and let's dive into our next team. This one is going to be a very exciting team to look at. This will be a dynasty squad. So actually, you know what? I'm going to do this just with a personalized podcast. I will send that to them directly just because I'd imagine that most people watching this aren't playing dynasty. This isn't our dynasty channel. And yeah, they don't want to be seeing this, but let's go over and let's get this breakdown going for Jay. My man, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. You'll be super happy to go through, check this team out for you. Saying, hey Mason, happy to be a part of the community. I was looking for some advice on my redraft team. It's a 10-team PPR. Only significant scoring change is -2 points per interception. Yeah, generally that's not going to change much for us, right? I mean, outside of the very rare instances of like a Jameis Winston, it's very difficult for us to sit here and predict exactly what quarterbacks are more prone than not to actually go through and rack up a ton of interceptions, right? Saying I'm clearly weak at running back. Would you move a wide receiver to strengthen the position or rely on my wide receiver group to pull through? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's pull this up again. Thank you so much, my friend, for being a member of the flock. Going to be really, really happy to look at this. Now, the main thing that I want to be focusing on with this team, before we look at the players, of course, is going to be the overall starting lineup requirements that we have. It's going to be a little bit different than the other teams that we looked at previously. So the difference that we are going to have here is this going to be a league where we actually have 2 flex spots in comparison to 1. And in a league where you have 2 flex spots in comparison to 1, especially in a full PPR format, which I believe you said this is. Yes, it is 10-team full PPR. All of a sudden, we're able to build a little bit more around wide receiver. We're able to go through and target the elite level wide receivers while having some depth throughout the entire position, just because we can start up to 4 of these guys on a week-to-week basis, right? And here, before we get into the wide receiver, we'll go over to quarterback for a second. We have Lawrence. We're completely fine with Lawrence. Now, generally, I don't think we need to roster a backup quarterback. You have Geno Smith down here, and I'm fine if you want to have Geno. It's just like, okay, are we really ever starting Geno Smith over Trevor Lawrence, even if Geno has the best matchup possible, right? If the answer to that question is no for you, if you're starting Lawrence regardless of matchup, then I probably only roster Lawrence and look for a high upside running back off the waiver wire. But if you think there's a world where you're actually starting Geno Smith on a week-to-week perspective based off matchup, then you can roster both guys. And now going over to running back, currently sitting with ETN as well as Cam Akers. I do like the ETN-Lawrence pairing, so we're essentially making a bet that the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is better than people assume. And then going down to the bench, we have Dillon as well as Javonte Williams. So I understand, and I agree with you, that, yeah, on the surface, this running back room doesn't look super strong, right? I mean, with Travis Etienne, he's probably a low-end RB1. Cam Akers / Javonte Williams, these guys are probably low-end RB2s, maybe RB3s. So on the surface, it's like, yeah, this team does project to have a little bit of a weaker RB room, but that's how it projects. In reality, in fantasy football, when we project something, we are just trying to figure out what the highest probability of that thing being is. If there's a 20% chance Cam Akers is an RB1, 50% chance he's an RB2, 20% he's an RB3, and 10% he's useless, we just kind of say, oh, he's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. But there's an outside chance he comes out here and crushes. That's a very real possibility. So in my mind, it's always not a smart move to go through and say, okay, this position is probably going to be weak. So instead of waiting until week 1, instead of waiting until week 2, for us to get confirmation on our projections, we need to go through and need to make a trade right now. No, I think that you sit on your hands. I think we let the season come to us and get way more clarity with this situation, with Cam Akers, with Javonte Williams, with Travis Etienne, with A.J. Dillon, because we may get to week 1. Cam Akers may look like an RB1. I don't know. Javonte Williams may look like he's 100%. So I don't necessarily think we need to be making a quote-unquote trade to get a better running back in the starting lineup. Now, going over to wide receiver, we're elite, right? We're going to be just freaking crushing our league mates here. We have Tyreek, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Amari Cooper. Even down there in the bench, we have Jahan Dotson as well as Elijah Moore. This is a freaking nuts wide receiver room. And I understand the thought process. Oh, Mason, do I want to trade one of these wide receivers and get a better running back? And if you had the dream deal on the table where you can trade Jahan Dotson and Cam Akers, and in return, you're going to get Jonathan Taylor, right? Then, of course, we're going to go ahead and do it. I think you could send out feelers. It's just not something that you have to do. And I love how we're optimizing for this league where we have those multiple flex spots, where we're able to go through and where we are able to build around that wide receiver position. It's a 10-team, full PPR format, and we're able to start 4 of these elite studs every week. Going over to tight end, we are currently rostering George Kittle. Kittle's had 3 straight seasons of a top 5 finish from a points per game perspective. We do have Dalton Kincaid down there in the bench. Kincaid is the one tight end that I'm actually fine with you rostering as a backup, right? Because specifically with Kincaid, this is a player that you don't really expect to give you much at the beginning portion of the season, but we can say, okay, he probably has an elite level ceiling down the stretch. He probably can be pretty damn good in weeks 15, 16, 17. So I'm fine if you wanted to roster a backup tight end there with Kincaid. The only thing that I'll say, if you're worried about your running back position, Geno probably has to go for me, and I'll probably just cut Geno Smith, see if we can find another running back off the waiver wire that maybe we just get one more bite at the apple to solve that position. Overall, this is a phenomenal team. I mean, if we were looking at making any other moves, I have Amari Cooper ranked 1 slot ahead of Calvin Ridley, but in my mind, if we have Lawrence and we're already making a bet on the Jacksonville Jaguars overall offense, I wouldn't mind going through and just shooting for the ceiling and possibly doubling down on said bet by looking to trade like Amari Cooper for Calvin Ridley, if that makes sense. So I think that could be interesting if you wanted to go ahead and look down that path, my friend. But let me see if there's anything. This is just a phenomenal team. I wish I could tell you more. I wish I could give you some more advice on that. But, I mean, my man, that is just a nutso squad. Everybody in the chat was sitting here saying that it was an 8-team league. They didn't believe that it's actually a 10-team format. I mean, that's a phenomenal team. I don't necessarily think you need to make any moves. I think you need to wait until we actually get some clarity on the running backs there, and we can possibly make a move afterwards. But let's go ahead and let's scroll down. We're going to be diving into Tim's team here as our next squad. And, of course, if you're just now coming in, if you don't know what we're doing, we are breaking down new members of the flock, their fantasy football teams. It's what I do all day, but I generally do this in personalized podcasts. We don't do it on the live stream, but it looks like y'all are really enjoying this on the stream, so maybe we're going to do some more of these live streams going forward. And of course, if you want to get your team broken down, or if you want to get my rankings, my premium content, I mean, if you want to get everything that I do, it's on flockfantasy.com. You can sign up to flockfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK. You're going to get 30% off any subscription, and also promo code FLOCK, as well as the Mother Flocker tier. Yours truly is going to go through and break down your fantasy football team in either a podcast or in one of these live streams, whatever you prefer. And if you are already on flockfantasy.com and you don't know how to do that, go hit the Discord button at the very top of flockfantasy.com or on your account page. That's going to get you in our fantasy football group chat, and it's going to link your flockfantasy.com account with your Discord account. And then if you did use promo code FLOCK in the Mother Flocker tier, you will get the roster submissions tab unlocked, and you can send your team in there, ladies and gentlemen. But let's move this over. This question coming out, and actually, quick side note, I know a lot of y'all are on Underdog as well. If you are on flockfantasy.com, also on your account page, put on your Underdog username, hit enter, and it'll immediately add $10 free into your Underdog account. So make sure you're taking advantage of that as well. I mean, that's completely, that doesn't do anything for me. It just gives y'all free $10. Now, Tim says, hey, Mason, appreciate you breaking down the squad. This is a draft from a 10-team PPR from pick 2. Okay, let's go ahead and let's pull this up again. Thank you so much, my man, for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. I'm going to be really happy to go through and check this team out for you. All right, so this is going to be a very shallow league, right? I mean, you were saying this is a 10-team format where we're only starting 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a tight end, and a flex. So go back to what we were talking about previously with some of these other teams. I mean, generally, you are only really caring about the ceiling here. And I hate to say that, but just it's on repeat. It's so damn true. Wide receiver depth is useless in this league. Someone like Deontay Johnson, Hollywood Brown, Brandon Ayuk, those guys may be exciting if you are in a league where you start 3 wide receivers and you have multiple flex spots. If you start 3 wide receivers and you have 1 flex, if you start 2 wide receivers and you have 3 flexes, yeah, load up on all those wide receiver 2s. But if it's a 10-team format where you can only start 3 wide receivers at the most, we're not wanting to build around those guys. I would rather get an elite level quarterback. I'd rather get an elite level tight end. I'd rather have some solid running back production. And here, if we are looking at quarterback, beautiful. We have Justin Herbert. With Herbert, I would prefer him in a 6-point passing touchdown format comparison to a 4-point league, just because generally you are banking on the overall passing volume, not necessarily the rushing upside. And then down there on the bench, we're not rostering a backup quarterback, which I 100% agree with. I would way rather focus it on that running back wide receiver upside on the bench. And going over to RB, we currently are sitting with Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift in the starting lineup. And then going down to the bench, we have Antonio Gibson, AJ Dillon, Jalen Warren as well. Ooh, okay, let me sit here and think for a second. This is an interesting spot in that maybe in the long term, once you get Kamara back, I think this is a running back room with upside. But obviously in the short term, we don't have the clarity on what the DeAndre Swift situation is going to be like in Philadelphia. We don't have the clarity on what the Gibson role is going to be splitting with Brian Robinson. We don't exactly know if Dillon or Jalen Warren are going to be startable at the beginning of the year either. And in the long term, we don't even know what Alvin Kamara's situation is going to be like either. So This is a running back room that has upside, but no guarantees, which generally I'm okay with that, right? But as long as we're rostering as many of those players as possible, we have 7 guys on our roster that fit that mold, 5 of them bust, who the hell cares, as long as 2 of them do go through and hit and possibly turn into league winners for us. Going over to wide receiver, we're rostering Jefferson, Waddle. So these are our cornerstone guys, right? Having Jefferson and Waddle out the gate, this is what gives you the flexibility where you don't have to focus in on wide receiver depth later on. I mean, you're just going to be able to go through, start these guys every single week, regardless of matchup. I mean, outside of an injury, outside of a bye, really the only other time you're ever going to start a wide receiver is in the flex. And then once we go through and have Keenan Allen as well, paired up with Justin Herbert, that essentially tells us, okay, so wide receiver depth's not going to be something we need to focus on when it comes down to the bench. So when we're down here, I know this sounds extreme, right? And generally, if you play in like a well-balanced fantasy football league where it's like a 12-team league, you add multiple flexes, I'd agree, similar to the team that we watched right before this. Brandon Ayuk there is appealing. Roster him. Roster Brandon Ayuk, Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman. However, what has to happen for Elijah Moore to get into our starting lineup? Serious question here. If you're looking at this, what has to happen for Elijah Moore to start over Jefferson, Waddle, Keenan Allen, Brandon Ayuk? Either serious injuries or a massive change in what we're projecting. I would say the same thing with Rashad Bateman here. So I know this is going to sound a little extreme, and I completely understand that. But based off this team where we have all the clarity and all the upside in the world at wide receiver already, I am not going to mind if we do everything we can to solve that running back 2 situation. And I think we solve that spot by not just trading away DeAndre Swift for a better player. Of course, if it was that easy, everybody would do it. But I think we do that by getting rid of Elijah Moore, getting rid of Rashad Bateman, and rostering 2 more running backs on the bench. I think we don't have running back 2 solved. I think we have a lot of random dart throws that could solve it, right? 100%. These guys have upside. We just don't know. So we get rid of Elijah Moore. We get rid of Bateman. We can even trade these players. We can trade Elijah Moore with Antonio Gibson and just get a slightly better running back. Trade Rashad Bateman with Jalen Warren and get a slightly better running back. Open up those 2 roster spots. Bring in 2 more RBs. Then at that point, you're still fine at wide receiver. We're still sitting with Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, Keenan Allen, Brandon Ayuk. If we run through all 4 of those wide receivers when you only have to start 2 and you can't find 2 to start, at that point, we can go to the waiver wire. We'll be able to find someone like Rashad Bateman. So I would actually get rid of those 2 wide receivers, pick up 2 running backs that you think have access to pretty damn high ceiling. Go ahead and just do everything we can to hopefully solve that running back 2 situation without having to trade for one. Obviously, it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, let's trade Jalen Waddle for Nick Chubb. I mean, we're not necessarily trying to go through and trade away the studs you already drafted. Now, going over to tight end, we have Dallas Goedert. Beautiful. I think having Goddard, starting him every single week, regardless of matchup. If something changes, injury, bye week, and go to the waiver wire. But yeah, I don't think you have to roster a backup tight end here when you have Dallas Goedert. So overall, really like the team, my man. I just think that we need to be throwing as many freaking darts at the dartboard to solve that running back 2 situation as we possibly can. But again, thank you so much, my friend, for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. I really hope we were able to help you out in some way here. I really hope you were able to get something from this. And of course, if there's anything I can ever do for you, please don't hesitate. Reach out to me. Let me know. I'll be super happy to help you out in any way that I can. Okay. But let's go over and look at this next team. This one coming out from S. This is a good screenshot. We can do this. But real quick, before we look at this, we are 3 likes away from hitting 500 likes on this live stream. If y'all would rather have me live streaming these than just making them with personalized podcasts and DMing them to people individually, please make sure to go down there, drop a like on the stream, help us get a 500. And we are going to be live streaming again later tonight with fantasy football drafts. So please make sure you're subscribed as well if somehow you have not done so already. Now, everybody asking what the Discord link is. Like I said, you have to be a member of the flock on flockfantasy.com. Promo code flock, mother flocker tier, and the Discord link will be on flockfantasy.com. You can click the Discord icon either at the very top of the page, any page you're on, or you can go to your account page on flockfantasy.com, click the Discord icon. It will link your Discord account with your flockfantasy.com account, and then it will unlock the roster submissions tab for you. If you just join the Discord randomly, you're not going to have the roster submissions tab unlocked. Okay, but S coming out, thank you so much, my friend, for being a member of the flock, saying, hey, Mason, I was pick 11 in a 12-team full PPR draft. This is my first year playing fantasy. Any advice is appreciated. Hell yes, going to get to see a first-year fantasy football players team. My man, thank you so much for joining the flock and being willing to come out here and be a part of our community. I'm so damn happy to have you, and I really, really do appreciate you. And let's go ahead. Let's dive into this. So before we look at the team, we're going to be looking at the league settings we always do. So it's going to be a league where we start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex. So wide receiver is going to matter here more. I mean, going back to what we were talking about that previous team where we're saying, yeah, you have to drop these wide receivers off the bench. You only start 2. You only have 1 flex. No, if you have to start 3 wide receivers and have a flex spot, wide receiver depth is actually going to be somewhat important, especially in a 12-team league. And then going down, we only have 5 roster spots down there on the bench. So not a super, super deep league overall, but I mean, definitely a league where we need to be optimizing at least a little bit at wide receiver, right? Considering the fact that we have to start 3 of these guys. But going over to the starting lineup, at quarterback, we have Deshaun Watson. I mean, I personally think betting on Deshaun Watson this year is probably a pretty good idea. Last year, yeah, he wasn't great at the end of the season. Man had not played football in literally forever. I mean, this next year, you are going to get Deshaun Watson with a full offseason to prepare. I mean, they're actually building the offense around him. You go back to 2017, 2018, 2019, every single season, this man was a top 3 quarterback from a points per game perspective. Every single time. Now, going down to the bench, we currently are sitting with Jared Goff. And to be honest with you, I probably am not going to be rostering Jared Goff here. I would actually probably rather just take another running back on the bench. I mean, you're going to be starting Watson every single week, regardless of matchup. If Watson gets injured or during his bye week, you can go to the waiver wire. You can play a backup quarterback there. It should be easy to stream the position, especially if you only have 5 bench spots. And yeah, generally, we don't want the same amount of quarterbacks on our bench as running backs. So I definitely drop Jared Goff in favor of another RB. But now going over to running back, I mean, we're sitting pretty. We have Bijan Robinson, Hook'em Lawrence. We have Travis Etienne. We also have James Cook in the starting lineup. Jarrett McKinnon down there on the bench with some overall depth. Yeah, so all these guys kind of fit the mold that we're looking for. I mean, they are players that can see large workloads or are in great offenses on their rookie contracts. That's 100% what I want. We're not rostering 28, 29, 30-year-old running backs here. Beautiful, my friend. I mean, Bijan, Travis Etienne, some of my most drafted running backs this year. Going over to wide receiver, we have Lamb, Amari, Godwin. We have Amari stacked up with Deshaun Watson. Going down to the bench, we have Jahan Dotson, who also is now going to get the bump up with the Terry McLaurin injury. And to be honest with you, I think that we go ahead and we actually look to bump Dotson with the McLaurin injury. And I would be looking to start Jahan Dotson early on. I would start Jahan Dotson over James Cook. Maybe we change our mind at the beginning of the season if we get to see the role for James Cook. And I mean, he's going out there and he is seeing every single touch, including the touches in the red zone for the Buffalo Bills. But I think we moved Dotson in the starting lineup over James Cook at the beginning portion of the year. And great roster construction overall. Going over to tight end, we have Darren Waller. Now, full transparency with Waller, I think the hype has gotten a little bit out of control. I mean, I think that he is in a phenomenal situation this next season. But at the end of the day, this is a 31-year-old tight end that, statistically speaking, has been on the decline. His team gave him up for a 3rd-round pick. I would personally see if we can take advantage of this Darren Waller hype, possibly trade him straight up and see if we can get George Kittle in return. George Kittle has had 3 straight seasons of a top 5 tight end finish, and he's not showing any signs of decline. He's also younger than Darren Waller. I actually would prefer George Kittle. I'd also look for a player like TJ Hawkinson, whereas with TJ Hawkinson, you're looking at a tight end that's stepping into his prime, coming off a top 5 season at the position as well. If we could sell Waller for either of those guys, I think that'd be interesting. But Waller should still be a great option in a 12-team PPR format. And then going over to the bench, we have Dalton Kincaid. What's interesting is when we have this great tight end, like, I think Kincaid's a tight end that has a lot of upside on the bench for later on in the year. I'm just a little hesitant in saying to roster him because we only have 5 bench spots, right? So when you only have 5 bench spots, you're going to be wanting to make so many waiver wire moves through the course of the season because there are going to be so many solid players that we can pick up. And Kincaid is one of these guys that we kind of have to roster for the long term. Like, you're not going to be drafting Dalton Kincaid and thinking that all of a sudden he's going to be breaking out week 1, breaking out week 2. He's a rookie tight end. Rookie tight ends don't really produce. And if they are, it's going to be later on in the season. So I don't know if I want to be rostering Kincaid in a league where we already have a phenomenal tight end, while at the same time we only have 5 bench spots. I feel like he is going to be clogging our roster here a bit. So I would possibly look to, honestly, I think I'd look to move off of Kincaid. If we could sell him, because I think he does have value in a deal with like James Cook, sell him high for maybe a better running back. And I'm not saying you have to sell James Cook. I think he's a great option. Just something that I'll explore just because I do want to roster, an extra wide receiver or an extra running back down here on the bench. But thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. I really hope you're able to get something from this. I really hope we were able to help you out in some way. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. I'll be super happy to help you out any way that I can. But thank you again. I really, really do appreciate you. And yeah, thank you for being a member of the flock. And let's go over to our next team. I think we accidentally skipped over Mills' team here, so we are going to do this one. But do want to call out someone saying Kittle trash. Kittle won me a $100,000 underdog tournament last year, my friend. So what are we talking about here? Kittle's been a top 5 tight end for 3 straight seasons from a points per game perspective. You a Seahawks fan or something? Well, I mean, objectively speaking, you were just flat out wrong. I don't even think you can try to make that argument. But let's go ahead and let's dive into Mills' team, unless we already did this one. No, we didn't. We didn't. Saying, hey, Mason, would love for you to break down the squad for me and let me know any moves that should be made. I was picked 4, and it's a 10-team PPR format, 4-point passing touchdown. All right. So 10-team league, 4-point passing touchdown. We start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, tight end, and a flex. Okay. So unlike the team that we looked right before this one, this is going to be going back to the mindset wide receiver depth does not matter, right? Wide receiver depth doesn't matter. Let's get an elite quarterback. Let's get elite running backs. Let's get an elite tight end if we can. And guys like Deontay Johnson, Brandon Ayuk, Hollywood Brown, Mike Williams, even if they're exciting players, at the end of the day, they're never really going to move the needle for us. Now, out the gate, pick 4, we ended up taking Tyreek Hill. I'm fine if you want to go Tyreek at 4. I personally probably go Kelsey in this format, but that's just me knowing that we're going to get some great wide receiver values later on. But I'm not going to fault anybody for taking Tyreek Hill, right? I mean, Tyreek averaged 108 receiving yards per game with Tua last year. Now, afterwards, at the 2-3 turn, we either went Jalen Hurts, then Josh Jacobs, or Josh Jacobs, then Jalen Hurts. Regardless, beautiful. Literally could not be better. I mean, right now, sitting with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, Jalen Hurts, my QB1 in a 4-point passing touchdown format league where we are optimizing for rushing upside. I think that makes so much freaking sense, my friend. Going over to the bench, I mean, we are currently not rostering another quarterback, which is what Jalen Hurts gives you with his overall value, the elite ceiling, the elite floor. You're not having to roster a backup QB. I think that makes so much sense here, my friend, for Jalen Hurts. Now, to go over to running back, we have Jacobs. I mean, you do the math and you do the historical research dating back since the year 2000. If you look at running backs that had the same season as Jacobs last year, over 50% of the time the following year, if you're looking at a volume perspective, they're a top 6 running back in fantasy football. So having Jacobs as an RB1 is something you're very excited about. Etienne is a potential 3-down running back on a rookie contract on a team with a great offense. Great ETN call there as an RB2. We have Javonte for the upside in the flex. We have Dobbins for more upside on the bench. We have Charbonnet for upside. Yeah, freaking great running back room. Going over to wide receiver, we have Tyreek, Ridley. So I do like that we're making that one consolidated bet right on that Jacksonville Jaguars offense, where we have Travis Etienne as well as Calvin Ridley on the same team. Then going down to the bench, we have Mike Williams, wide receiver 3, JSN, wide receiver 4, Treylon Burks, wide receiver 5, Rashad Bateman, wide receiver 6. We don't need 6 wide receivers on this team, my man. Specifically in a league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, I'm not going to be about rostering 6 wide receivers. I think that you're probably better off going through and, I don't want to say cutting these guys, right? Like Bateman has too much value to cut. I think if we can make a deal, that'd be great. I don't necessarily know if we can make a trade right away, though. And the reason being is you have JSN injured. You have Treylon Burks injured. I think we're going to have to wait until we get one of these guys back and healthy. But once one of these guys are back and healthy, and at that point we have a little more flexibility on what we can be doing with this team, then I think we go ahead and we look to package together one of our wide receivers with Pat Freiermuth at tight end and see if we can get an elite level tight end. Now, with that being said, I love Freiermuth. Freiermuth is one of my most drafted tight ends on Underdog Fantasy this year. But if we're talking about just trying to optimize for our overall league format, with how much freaking value we already have at the top end at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and how much depth we have at wide receiver, running back as well, really the only improvement that we can make with this team, and it's something we can afford, and that's the most important part, just because we are so loaded at wide receiver and running back, is if we could package together, say, a wide receiver and Pat Freiermuth to get an elite level tight end in return. That's something I would look at. Like if we could say, even sell Calvin Ridley. And I'm not saying Calvin Ridley is bad. I'm not saying you need to sell Calvin Ridley. But just from an overall strategy perspective, if you get back JSN and JSN's producing, or Treylon Burks and Burks is producing, and we have Mike Williams, JSN, Treylon Burks, Rashad Bateman all on the bench in a league where we only start 2 wide receivers, if we could package together like Calvin Ridley and Pat Freiermuth and get Kelsey and get Andrews, I think that can make a lot of sense. Or if you could go like Mike Williams and Pat Freiermuth and get Kittle and get Hawkinson, I think that would make a lot of sense as well. And then you could just backfill that open roster spot with more exciting wide receiver, running back upside calls down there on the bench as well. Yeah, I think that's generally the only move that we can look to make, just because this team's already so freaking loaded everywhere else. I love the squad, my man. I mean, congrats on building a freaking juggernaut roster. And again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. I really hope we were able to help you out in some way here. I really hope that you were able to get something from this. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. I'd be super happy to help you out in any way that I can. But my voice is kind of croaking out here. I kind of scream on the live streams. When we do the personalized podcast, I can talk a little bit quieter. So I'm probably going to cut this here. I'm going to be recording the personalized podcast, breaking down people's fantasy football teams over the next few hours until we will be live at 7 p.m. Eastern, drafting fantasy football teams. But of course, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And of course, as always, if you want to get your team broken down, make sure you sign up to flockfantasy.com, promo code FLOCK. There you're going to get all my exclusive articles, live streams, Discord chat, bonus content, and also gain access to all the favorite fantasy football creators that you have. And if you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. Promo code FLOCK in the Mother Flocker tier is how you're going to get yours truly to go through and break down your fantasy football team in a personalized podcast. Just join the Discord chat on the top of flockfantasy.com. Click that button. It will link your 2 accounts, and then you can go send in the roster submissions tab on Discord right here. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. And I really do hope I get to see you out with the live stream in about an hour and a half.